New York City, penthouse of the Plaza Hotel. The golden champagne sparkled under the crystal chandelier lights, and Marina Santos adjusted her borrowed black dress for the third time in 5 minutes. She definitely didn't belong at this charity gala where a single canapé cost more than her weekly salary as a freelance journalist. "Relax, Mari," whispered Camila, pulling her by the arm. "You look gorgeous, and this is our chance to get that exclusive interview with the CEO of Petrovisk Industries." Marina rolled her eyes. "Cam, I don't even know what he looks like. I just know he's more closed off than Fort Knox and hates journalists." "Exactly. Imagine the headline, 'Brazilian journalist breaks through the country's most mysterious magnate's defenses.'" At that moment, a tall man in an impeccable suit and military posture crossed the ballroom. Perfectly aligned black hair, defined jawline, and an expression that could freeze fire. He was clearly irritated, speaking on the phone in English with an accent Marina couldn't identify. "No, Victor. I said I don't want photographers here. Yes, I know it's for charity, but—" Marina didn't hear the rest. Her attention was captured by a group of socialites whispering maliciously while watching a younger girl, obviously out of place, spill champagne on her own purse. "Look at that, everyone," said a blonde with red nails. "Who brought this creature here? Clearly doesn't even know how to hold a glass." The girl, who couldn't be more than 19, was red with embarrassment, trying to clean up the mess with paper napkins. Marina felt her blood boil. She had grown up being the weird one at the private school where she studied on scholarship, and she knew that look of superiority well. "Excuse me," said Marina, approaching the group. "I think you're confusing charity with cruelty." The blonde turned with a venomous smile. "Sorry, darling, but you are? Someone who doesn't need to humiliate children to feel important." "Children?" The woman gave a shrill laugh. "She's old enough to know she shouldn't be here. And you're old enough to have manners, but clearly that didn't work out." The entire group turned to Marina, who felt all conversations around them stop, including that of the mysterious man on the phone. "How dare you!" exclaimed another socialite. "Do you know who you're talking to?" "Someone who desperately needs a better hobby," Marina replied, putting her arm protectively around the girl. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's find people who deserve our company." But the blonde wasn't finished. Typical nouveau riche. I bet she doesn't even have her own invitation. Marina stopped. That went too far. "You know what?" she said, turning slowly. "You're right. I don't belong in this world of plastic and futility, but at least I have something your money will never buy." "What would that be?" "Decency." The woman went livid. "You have no idea who I am. My husband—" "Your husband what?" Marina took 2 steps forward. "Is going to sue me for having my own opinion." That's when she felt an imposing presence behind her. A deep voice with a slightly British accent cut through the air like a blade. "Is there a problem here?" Marina turned and met the most penetrating eyes she'd ever seen in her life. Gray-green like the sea before a storm. The man from the phone was now beside her, and she could smell his expensive cologne mixed with something more masculine and dangerous. "There's no problem at all," said the blonde, suddenly nervous. "We were just being absolutely charming as always," he completed, and there was enough ice in his voice to cool the entire penthouse. Marina looked at him, then at the women who suddenly seemed to want to disappear, and made an impulsive decision that would change her life forever. "You know what?" she said loud enough for half the ballroom to hear. "I don't need to defend myself to people like this. I have better things to do." And before she could think about what she was doing, Marina grabbed the stranger by the lapels of his jacket and kissed him. It was a firm, determined kiss that lasted exactly 5 seconds, enough time for the entire ballroom to fall into absolute silence. When she pulled away, the man looked at her with an indescribable expression. "Thanks for the support," whispered Marina, still with her hands on his chest. "Sometimes you need to make a statement." And she left there as if she owned the place, leaving behind an entire ballroom of open mouths and a man who, for the first time in years, didn't know exactly what to say. Camila caught up with her at the elevator, breathless. "Mari!" Have you completely lost your mind? Probably, Marina replied, pressing the ground floor button. But it was worth every second. Do you know who you just kissed? A polite guy who defended me? Marina. Camila swallowed hard. That was Alexander Petrovisk, the CEO of Petrovisk Industries, the most powerful man in America. The elevator stopped and Marina felt her stomach drop along with it. What? And worse yet, Camila continued, pulling out her phone. There are already 3 different videos of your kiss on Instagram. You just went viral kissing the most inaccessible man in the country. Marina looked at her reflection in the elevator mirror. Her lips still tasted of danger and infinite possibilities. Damn, she murmured. Upstairs, Alexander Petrovisk was still standing in the same spot, his fingers unconsciously touching his lips. Beside him, his assistant Victor cleared his throat nervously. Sir, the press is already calling. What should I say? Alexander finally moved, adjusting his jacket with the military precision that characterized him. Find out everything about her, he said, his voice lower than normal. Name, address, history, family, everything. Sir, and Victor? Alexander turned to his assistant, and for the first time in years there was something that could be mistaken for a smile on his lips. Cancel my agenda for tomorrow. I have a journalist to meet. Marina's apartment, Brooklyn, New York. Marina woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing like an angry hornet. She'd managed exactly 3 hours of sleep after lying awake replaying the kiss that had apparently broken the internet. Her modest 1-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn felt even smaller with the weight of her impulsive decision pressing down on her. 37 missed calls, she mumbled, scrolling through her phone. 18 from unknown numbers, 12 from Camila, and… Her blood ran cold. 7 from Vogue magazine? She stumbled to the kitchen, desperately needing coffee, when her doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw a man in an expensive suit holding a massive bouquet of white orchids. Marina Santos? His voice was crisp, professional, with a slight Eastern European accent. Depends who's asking, she replied, not opening the door. I'm Viktor Kozlov, representing Mr. Alexander Petrovisk. He'd like to arrange a meeting. Marina's coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. A meeting? At his earliest convenience, which would be now. Now? It's 7 a.m. Mr. Petrovisk is an early riser. He's waiting downstairs in his car. Marina peered through the window and saw a sleek black Tesla parked below, tinted windows hiding its occupant. Her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was already on her fire escape, openly staring while watering her plants. Tell him I'm not dressed for meetings. He anticipated that. There's a selection of appropriate attire in the car. Marina blinked. I'm sorry, what? Size 8, correct? Mr. Petrovisk is very thorough. How does he know my… Marina stopped herself. Never mind. I don't want to know. 20 minutes later, Marina found herself in the back of the most luxurious car she'd ever seen, wearing a perfectly fitted navy dress that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Alexander sat across from her, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread, completely unbothered by the early hour. Good morning, Miss Santos, he said, his voice as smooth as aged whiskey. I hope you slept well. Like a baby, Marina lied, clutching her purse. You know, the kind that cries every hour. A ghost of a smile flickered across his lips. Honesty, I appreciate that. Great. Then honestly, why am I here? Are you going to sue me? Have me arrested for public indecency? Sue you? Alexander leaned forward slightly, and Marina caught a whiff of his cologne again. Miss Santos, that kiss was the most genuine human interaction I've had in years. Marina stared at him. You're joking. I don't joke about business. And this is business? Everything is business. He handed her a tablet. These are the headlines from this morning. Marina's eyes widened as she scrolled through the news articles. Mystery woman kisses billionaire CEO at charity gala. The kiss that broke the internet. Who is Marina Santos? Petrovisk Industries stock rises 3% after CEO's public romance. Oh my gosh. Marina whispered. I made your stock go up? Apparently, the market finds the idea of me having a personal life appealing. But you don't actually have a personal life. Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. No, I don't. The car pulled up to a sleek Manhattan office building, and Marina realized they were at Petrovisk Industries headquarters. The lobby was all glass and steel, with employees in perfectly pressed suits moving with military precision. Mr. Petrovisk, Victor appeared at Alexander's elbow as they stepped out of the elevator on the 47th floor. Your 8 a.m. is here, and Ms. Rodriguez from PR needs to speak with you urgently about the situation. Cancel the 8 a.m. and tell Carmen I'll handle the PR situation myself. Victor glanced nervously at Marina. Sir, perhaps we should discuss. Victor. Alexander's voice dropped to a temperature that could freeze champagne. I said I'll handle it. Marina watched this exchange with growing unease. She'd seen enough workplace dynamics to recognize when someone was walking on eggshells around their boss. Alexander's office was a monument to success and isolation. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Central Park, but the space felt cold, clinical. No personal photos, no warm colors, nothing that suggested a human being actually worked here. Nice place, Marina said, setting her purse down on his glass desk. Very sterile. I prefer efficient. Same thing, really. She turned to face him. Look, Mr. Petrovisk. Alexander. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not looking for anything from you. I don't want money, I don't want fame, and I definitely don't want to be your girlfriend. Good, he said, moving to pour himself coffee from an elaborate machine. Because I'm not offering any of those things. Marina felt oddly stung by his bluntness. Then what do you want? I want you to be my girlfriend. I just said I don't want… Wait, what? Alexander turned back to her, his expression unreadable. Not actually, publicly. I need you to pretend to be my girlfriend for the next 3 months. Marina sat down heavily in the chair across from his desk. Are you insane? Completely sane, and completely serious. He sat down across from her, placing a contract on the desk between them. My board of directors has been pressuring me to settle down. They think it would be good for the company's image, make me seem more relatable. And instead of actually dating someone, you want to hire a fake girlfriend? I don't have time for actual relationships. They're messy, complicated, and ultimately disappointing. Wow, Marina said, flipping through the contract. You really know how to charm a girl. I'm not trying to charm you, I'm trying to offer you a mutually beneficial arrangement. Marina read the compensation clause and nearly choked. This is more money than I make in 2 years. 3 months, Miss Santos. A few public appearances, some carefully orchestrated social media posts, and you'll have enough money to pursue whatever journalistic dreams you have without worrying about rent. And what do you get out of this? A girlfriend who won't try to change me, won't demand emotional intimacy, and won't be devastated when it's over. Marina stared at him across the desk. There was something almost vulnerable in the way he said it, despite his matter-of-fact tone. You really don't believe in love, do you? I believe in results. Love is just brain chemistry designed to ensure species survival. That's the most depressing thing I've ever heard. It's realistic. Marina stood up, pacing to the window. The morning sun was hitting the park and she could see couples jogging together, families feeding ducks, people living actual lives. What if I say no? Then you walk away, and we both pretend last night never happened. And if I say yes? Then you become the luckiest woman in New York. At least that's what everyone will think. Marina turned back to him. There's something you're not telling me. Alexander's mask slipped for just a moment, and she saw something raw and carefully hidden in his eyes. There's a lot I'm not telling you. Such as the fact that my father is dying, and he's made it clear that the only way I'll inherit control of the company is if I prove I can maintain a stable relationship. Marina's expression softened. I'm sorry about your father. Don't be. He's been using emotional manipulation to control me my entire life. This is just his latest move. And you're going to let him win? I'm going to beat him at his own game." Alexander stood up, straightening his tie. "So, Miss Santos, do we have a deal?" Marina looked at the contract, then at Alexander, then back at the contract. 3 months. Enough money to change her life. And something in those gray-green eyes that made her think maybe, just maybe, she could help him remember what it felt like to be human. "I have conditions," she said finally. "I'm listening. First, I maintain my journalistic integrity. I won't write puff pieces about you or your company." "Agreed." "Second, no one can know this is fake. Not even our families. Especially not our families. Third," Marina took a deep breath, "if at any point this starts to feel too real, we walk away. No questions asked." Alexander extended his hand. "Deal." As their hands touched, Marina felt that same electric spark from the night before. From the way Alexander's pupils dilated slightly, she knew he felt it too. "One more thing," she said, not letting go of his hand. "What happens if we actually start to like each other?" Alexander's smile was sharp as a blade. "Then we'll have bigger problems than your fake girlfriend contract." 1 week later, Le Bernardin Restaurant, Manhattan. Marina stared at her reflection in the ladies' room mirror of one of New York's most exclusive restaurants, wondering how her life had become so surreal in just 7 days. The emerald green dress Alexander's stylist had selected fit her perfectly, but she felt like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "It's just dinner, with cameras, and the most intimidating man you've ever met. Who's paying you to pretend to love him?" Her phone buzzed with a text from Camilla. "Girl, you're trending on Twitter again. Power couple is the #1 hashtag. What did you do to that man?" What indeed? Over the past week, Alexander had been surprisingly present. Fresh flowers delivered to her apartment every morning, thoughtful texts asking about her day, and yesterday he'd somehow arranged for her favorite coffee shop to stay open late when she was working on a deadline. "It's all for show," she reminded herself. "He's building a narrative." But then why did her stomach flutter every time his name appeared on her phone? Marina returned to their corner table, where Alexander was checking his phone with that familiar focused intensity. He looked up as she approached, and something in his expression shifted. Softer, warmer, like he was genuinely happy to see her. "Everything all right?" he asked, standing to pull out her chair. "Just giving myself a pep talk." "Nervous about the photographers?" Marina glanced toward the restaurant's windows, where she could see camera flashes going off despite the tinted glass. "Among other things." Alexander followed her gaze, his jaw tightening slightly. "We can leave if you're uncomfortable." "No, it's fine. This is what we signed up for, right?" "Right." But he didn't sound entirely convinced either. Their waiter appeared with practiced discretion, and Alexander ordered wine without consulting her, a 2015 Burgundy that probably cost more than her laptop. "You know," Marina said, unfolding her napkin, "most fake boyfriends would at least pretend to ask their fake girlfriend's preferences. Most fake girlfriends wouldn't call out their fake boyfriends in public." "Touché." Marina smiled despite herself. "Though technically we're not in public. This is a very exclusive, very private public. The most dangerous kind." As if summoned by his words, a familiar blonde figure glided past their table. Veronica Ashworth Chen, the socialite from the charity gala, now dressed in head-to-toe designer everything and wearing a smile that could cut glass. "Alexander, darling," she cooed, air-kissing near his cheeks. "And Marina, wasn't it? How unexpected to see you here." "Veronica," Alexander's voice could have frozen the wine. "How lovely. I simply had to stop by. Everyone's talking about you two. Such a romantic story. Love at first sight at a charity gala. Though I have to say the kiss was rather aggressive." Marina felt her cheeks burn. But before she could respond, Alexander's hand covered hers on the table. "I prefer passionate," he said, his thumb tracing across her knuckles. "Marina doesn't do anything halfway." The casual touch sent electricity up Marina's arm, and she had to remind herself it was all performance. "How refreshing." Veronica's smile grew sharper. "Well, I won't keep you lovebirds. Though, Alexander, darling, your father called me yesterday. He's so pleased about your development." Alexander's hand stiffened on Marina's. "My father discusses my personal life with you. Oh, you know how worried he's been about you. All work and no play. He's just thrilled you finally found someone who can handle you." Marina squeezed Alexander's hand, feeling the tension radiating from him. "Actually, I find Alexander very easy to handle. It's all about knowing which buttons to push." She looked directly at Alexander as she said it, and was rewarded with something that might have been genuine amusement in his eyes. "Indeed," Veronica said, clearly missing the undercurrent. "Well, enjoy your dinner. I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of you, Marina." As she glided away, Alexander's shoulders relaxed fractionally. "Friend of yours?" Marina asked. "Family friend. The kind you inherit and can never get rid of. Ah, like a genetic disease, but with better jewelry." Alexander laughed, an actual, genuine laugh that transformed his entire face. Several heads turned at nearby tables, as if they'd never heard the sound before. "Did I say something funny?" Marina asked. "You have a very unique way of seeing the world. Is that CEO speak for weird?" "It's Alexander speak for refreshing." Their appetizers arrived, and Marina watched Alexander's precise way of eating. Every movement controlled, efficient, like he'd been trained to turn even a meal into a business meeting. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Shoot. When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to? Not because it was good for business or expected of you, but just because it made you happy?" Alexander paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "That's a very personal question for a fake relationship. Maybe, but I'm curious. You're paying me to pretend to care about you. The least you can do is give me something real to work with." He set down his fork, considering. "I bought a motorcycle last year, a Ducati Panigale V4. It serves no practical purpose, costs a fortune to maintain, and my insurance company thinks I'm insane. Do you ride it? Every Sunday morning at 6 a.m. I take the highway up to Bear Mountain, and for about 3 hours I'm not a CEO or an heir or anyone's expectation. I'm just me." Marina felt something shift in her chest. "That's not what I expected you to say." "What did you expect?" "Something about acquiring a rare wine or commissioning a piece of art. Rich guy stuff." Disappointed. Intrigued. Marina leaned forward. "Take me with you sometime." Alexander's eyes widened slightly. "On the motorcycle? Why not? Unless you think your fake girlfriend can't handle it." "It's not about handling it, it's—" He paused and she could see him wrestling with something. "That's my escape, my one space that's just mine. And you don't share escapes." "I don't share anything." The honesty in his voice caught Marina off guard. "That sounds lonely." "Lonely is safe. Safe is overrated." They stared at each other across the table, and Marina felt like they were having an entirely different conversation than the one they were speaking out loud. "Miss Santos," Alexander said finally, "you're going to be trouble for me, aren't you?" "Mr. Petrovisk," Marina replied, raising her wineglass, "I'm going to be the best trouble you've ever had." As they clinked glasses, she noticed Alexander's hand was shaking almost imperceptibly. For just a moment, the mask slipped completely, and she saw something raw and vulnerable in his eyes, like a man who'd forgotten what it felt like to want something he couldn't simply buy. "Marina," he said quietly, "what if this gets complicated? Then we'll figure it out as we go. I don't like uncertainty." "I know, but maybe that's exactly what you need." Outside, the camera flashes continued, capturing what the world would see as a perfect romantic dinner between New York's newest power couple. But inside the restaurant, something much more dangerous was happening, Two people who were supposed to be pretending to fall in love were discovering that the hardest person to lie to was themselves. 2 weeks later, Petrovisk Estate, the Hamptons Marina, had seen wealth before, but nothing had prepared her for the Petrovisk family estate. The sprawling mansion sat on 50 acres of perfectly manicured lawns that rolled down to a private beach, where a yacht that could house a small village bobbed gently at anchor. As their car wound up the circular driveway, she counted at least 3 guest houses, a tennis court, and what appeared to be a stable. "Feeling intimidated yet?" Alexander asked, noticing her wide-eyed stare through the window. "Should I be?" "Probably. My father designed this place specifically to make people feel small." The car stopped in front of marble steps that led to doors tall enough for giants. A butler in formal attire appeared immediately, followed by a woman in her 50s wearing pearls and the expression that could have been carved from ice. "Alexander, darling," the woman said, offering her cheek for a kiss. "And this must be the famous Marina." "Mother," Alexander's voice carried the same warmth one might use to discuss tax audits. "Marina, this is my mother, Catherine Petrovisk." Catherine's handshake was firm, calculating. "Miss Santos, you've certainly caused quite a stir. Mrs. Petrovisk, your home is breathtaking." "Thank you. Alexander tells me you're a journalist. How contemporary." Marina felt the subtle dig but smiled sweetly. "I prefer to think of it as old-fashioned. Someone has to ask the uncomfortable questions." Alexander coughed, but Marina caught what might have been approval in his eyes. "Indeed," Catherine said. "Well, come. Your father is waiting in the study, Alexander. He's particularly eager to meet your girlfriend." As they walked through halls lined with oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors, Alexander leaned close to Marina's ear. "Fair warning, my father is going to try to dissect you like a lab specimen." "And your mother?" "Already has." The study was a monument to masculine authority. Dark wood, leather-bound books, and the overwhelming scent of aged whiskey and old money. Behind an enormous mahogany desk sat a man who was clearly Alexander 30 years in the future, if Alexander aged with the hardness of granite rather than wine. "Father," Alexander said, his posture becoming even more rigid, "this is Marina Santos." Dmitry Petrovisk stood slowly, his movements careful but commanding. Despite his illness, he radiated power like heat from a forge. His handshake was surprisingly strong, his gray eyes, so like Alexander's, sharp and assessing. "Miss Santos, so you're the woman who finally captured my son's attention." "I'm not sure captured is the right word, Mr. Petrovisk. It was more like a mutual collision." Dmitry's laugh was dry as autumn leaves. "Honest, I like that. Sit, both of you. We have much to discuss." Marina perched on the edge of a leather chair that probably cost more than her car, while Alexander remained standing behind her, a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed by his father. "Tell me about yourself, Miss Santos. Alexander has been surprisingly secretive about your background." "There's not much mystery, sir. I'm a freelance journalist from Brooklyn. I write about social issues, occasionally embarrass powerful people by asking them direct questions, and I once got arrested protesting outside a factory that was dumping chemicals in the Hudson River." "Arrested?" Catherine's voice carried a note of horror from where she'd positioned herself by the window. "Charges were dropped," Marina said cheerfully. "Turns out the factory was actually breaking federal law. Funny how that works." Dmitry leaned back in his chair, studying her with new interest. "And what do you think of my son's business practices?" Marina felt Alexander tense behind her. This was clearly a test, but she wasn't sure of what. "I think Alexander is brilliant at what he does, but I also think he uses his work to avoid dealing with more complicated aspects of life." The silence in the room was deafening. Catherine's pearls practically rattled with indignation, while Dmitry's eyebrows rose to his hairline. "Alexander," Dmitry said slowly, "leave us alone for a moment. Father, go check on the quarterly reports Victor brought. I want to speak with Miss Santos privately." Alexander hesitated. his hand briefly touching Marina's shoulder, a gesture of support that felt entirely too real for their fake relationship. "It's okay," Marina said, looking up at him. "I can handle your father." Something flickered in Alexander's eyes, concern, admiration, before he nodded curtly and left the room. "Well," Dmitri said once the door closed, "you certainly don't lack courage." "Is that what this is about? Courage?" "Partly." Dmitri poured himself a glass of whiskey from a crystal decanter. "Tell me, Miss Santos, what do you see when you look at my son?" Marina considered the question carefully. "I see someone who's forgotten how to trust anyone, including himself. I see someone who's built walls so high he can't remember what the view was like before he built them. And you think you can change him? I think he can change himself if he decides he wants to." Dmitri nodded slowly. "My son has been engaged twice. Did you know that?" Marina's stomach dropped. "No, he didn't mention that. The first time he was 25. Elizabeth Thornton, old New York family. Perfect on paper. She broke it off after 6 months, said dating him was like being in love with a beautiful statue. And the second? Natasha Volkov, daughter of a Russian oil magnate. Alexander proposed after a year of what I'm told was a very practical courtship. She said yes, then disappeared 3 weeks later with his best friend from college." Marina felt something twist in her chest that might have been jealousy, which was ridiculous considering their arrangement. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm dying, Miss Santos. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. 6 months, maybe less." Dimitri's voice was matter of fact, but Marina caught the slight tremor in his hands as he lifted his glass. "And my son is going to inherit one of the largest privately held companies in America. But more than that, he's going to be alone. Completely, utterly alone. Mr. Petrovisk, I know what you are to him," Dmitri continued, "or rather what he thinks you are. A business arrangement, a solution to pressure from the board of directors." Marina's blood chilled. "You know about the contract? I know my son. I know how his mind works. Emotional problem? Find a logical solution. Heart getting involved? Contain it with legal documents and financial incentives. Then why are you telling me this?" Dmitri leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. "Because in the 42 years I've known Alexander, I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you when he thought you were in danger just now. And more importantly, I've never seen him allow anyone to speak to me the way you just did without immediately ending the relationship. Maybe he's just being polite. Alexander is never polite at the expense of control. Never." Dmitri finished his whiskey. "Whatever you're doing to him, Miss Santos, keep doing it. Because for the first time since he was 12 years old, my son is acting like a human being instead of a machine." Before Marina could respond, the door opened, and Alexander returned, Victor at his side carrying a thick folder. "Father, the board meeting has been moved to Wednesday," Alexander said, but his eyes were on Marina. "Is everything all right?" "Perfectly fine," Dmitri said. "Miss Santos and I were just getting acquainted. I like her, Alexander. She has spine." "Yes," Alexander said quietly. "She does." The rest of the visit passed in a blur of carefully orchestrated family dinner conversation, but Marina couldn't shake what Dmitri had told her. As they drove back to the city, Alexander was unusually quiet. "Your father is dying," Marina said finally. Alexander's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "He told you. Why didn't you?" "Because it wasn't relevant to our arrangement." "Wasn't relevant?" Marina twisted in her seat to face him. "Alexander, your father is dying, and he's using your inheritance to manipulate you into a relationship. How is that not relevant?" "Because I'm going to beat him at his own game regardless. By pretending to love me? By proving I can maintain a stable relationship long enough to satisfy the board's requirements." Marina stared at his profile, noting the rigid set of his jaw, the white knuckles gripping the wheel. "What if you didn't have to pretend? What do you mean? What if you could actually have a real relationship? What if someone could actually care about you without wanting to change you or use you? Alexander was quiet for so long, Marina thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Then I'd probably find a way to ruin it. They drove the rest of the way in silence, but when they reached Marina's building, Alexander didn't immediately drive away. "Marina," he said as she opened the car door. "Yes? Tomorrow is Sunday. I'm aware. I leave for Bear Mountain at 6 a.m. Marina's heart skipped. Are you inviting me? I'm asking if you still want to come." "Why?" Alexander finally looked at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes nearly undid her. "Because maybe it's time I learned how to share my escape with someone else." The next morning, Marina stood outside her building at 5:50 a.m., wearing jeans and a leather jacket she'd borrowed from Camilla, wondering if she'd lost her mind. The sound of a motorcycle engine rumbling down her street answered that question definitively. Alexander pulled up on a machine that looked like it had been designed by angels and built by demons. He was wearing black leather and a helmet, and Marina had to remind herself to breathe. "You came," he said, pulling off his helmet. "I said I would. I wasn't sure you meant it. I don't say things I don't mean." He handed her a helmet and helped her onto the bike behind him. "Hold on tight," he said, "and don't let go." As they roared out of Brooklyn and onto the highway, Marina wrapped her arms around Alexander's waist and pressed her face against his back. She could feel his heartbeat through the leather, steady and strong. The city blurred past them as they climbed toward the mountains, and for the first time since she'd met him, she felt Alexander truly relax. At Bear Mountain, they sat on a rocky outcropping overlooking the Hudson Valley, sharing coffee from a thermos and watching the sun climb higher in the sky. "This is beautiful," Marina said. "It's the only place I can think clearly." "What do you think about up here?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment. "Lately, you." Marina turned to look at him. "Alexander, I know, this wasn't supposed to happen. You weren't supposed to matter. But I do matter. Yes. And that terrifies me more than anything my father or the board could ever do." Marina reached for his hand, and this time when their fingers intertwined, it had nothing to do with cameras or contracts or public perception. "What if we stopped pretending?" she said softly. "What if we didn't have to fake this anymore?" Alexander looked at their joined hands, then back at her face. "What if I told you I've been falling for you since the moment you walked out of that elevator after kissing me? I'd say you're 3 weeks behind me." When he kissed her this time, there were no cameras, no audiences, no business purposes. There was just Alexander and Marina, and the possibility that sometimes the most unexpected collisions create the most beautiful destinations. But neither of them noticed the telephoto lens hidden in the trees below, capturing every intimate moment for tomorrow's headlines. Monday morning, Petrovisk Industries headquarters. Marina woke up Monday morning with the taste of mountain air still on her lips, and the memory of Alexander's hands in her hair. For exactly 37 seconds, she allowed herself to float in the blissful bubble of their breakthrough at Bear Mountain. Then her phone started ringing. "Mari, where are you?" Camilla's voice was tight with panic. "Home, why? What time is it?" "It's 7 a.m. and you need to get to a newsstand now." Something cold settled in Marina's stomach. "Cam, what's wrong?" "Just get to a newsstand, and maybe call Alexander first." Marina threw on clothes and rushed to the corner bodega, her heart hammering. Mr. Patel, the owner, gave her a sympathetic look as she approached the magazine rack. "I'm sorry, Miss Marina," he said softly. The headline hit her like a physical blow. "Fake love for real money, the Petrovisk contract scandal." Below it, a photo of her and Alexander from Bear Mountain. Intimate, unguarded, his forehead pressed against hers as she laughed at something he'd said. But the image that made her blood turn to ice was the smaller photo in the corner, a grainy shot of what looked like legal documents. With shaking hands, she bought 3 different tabloids. Each one told the same story with varying degrees of salacious detail. Someone had leaked their contract. Someone had proof that their entire relationship was a business arrangement. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "My office. Now." The ride to Manhattan felt like traveling through a gauntlet. News vans lined the street outside Petrovisk Industries, and Marina could see reporters with cameras waiting like vultures. She used the underground parking garage entrance, but even there, a photographer managed to get a shot of her emerging from the elevator, looking pale and shaken. Alexander's office felt like a war room. Victor was pacing, barking orders into his phone in rapid Russian. Carmen Rodriguez, the head of PR, was typing furiously on her laptop while simultaneously conducting what sounded like a very heated conversation with someone from the New York Times. Alexander stood at his wall of windows, staring down at the circus below. He was perfectly dressed as always, but Marina could see the tension in the rigid line of his shoulders. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Bad," Carmen said without looking up. The story broke at 5 a.m. across 6 major outlets simultaneously. Someone didn't just leak this, they orchestrated a coordinated attack. "Who would have access to the contract?" Marina asked. "Very few people," Victor said, ending his call. "The lawyers who drafted it, Alexander, myself, and..." Alexander's voice was dangerously quiet. "And whoever might have had access to your father's private files." The silence in the room was deafening. Alexander turned slowly from the window, and Marina had never seen him look so coldly furious. "My father leaked this. We don't know that for certain," Victor said carefully. "Don't we?" Alexander's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "This has his fingerprints all over it. The timing, the coordination, the specific documents chosen. He wants me to fail." Marina felt like she was watching a man have his heart carved out in real time. "Alexander." "The board is meeting in an emergency session this afternoon," Carmen interrupted. "They're questioning whether you're fit to lead the company, if you can't even maintain an authentic personal relationship." "Perfect," Alexander said bitterly. Exactly what he wanted. Marina's phone started buzzing incessantly. Text after text, call after call. She glanced at the screen and saw messages from every major news outlet, several talk shows, and at least 3 book publishers. "Miss Santos," Carmen said, "I need to ask, are you planning to speak to the media about this?" "No, of course not. Because I have to warn you, there are already rumors that you're shopping around for a tell-all interview. Your phone has been traced to several major network buildings in the past hour." Marina stared at her. "My phone has been what now?" "GPS tracking. Standard practice when someone becomes a person of interest." "I haven't left my apartment except to come here." Alexander finally looked at her, and the suspicion in his eyes was like a knife to the chest. "Haven't you? Are you serious right now?" Marina's voice rose. "You think I leaked our contract?" "Someone did. Someone with access to confidential information and a lot to gain from destroying my reputation. What exactly would I gain from this? Fame, money, a book deal. Your 15 minutes extended to a full hour." Marina felt like he'd slapped her. "After everything we shared yesterday, you really think I'm capable of this?" "I don't know what you're capable of. That's the problem." The hurt in his voice was almost worse than the accusation. Marina realized that for all his talk of trust issues, Alexander had actually started to trust her, and now he felt betrayed all over again. "The GPS tracking," Victor said quietly, consulting his tablet. "It shows Miss Santos's phone pinging off towers near the Manhattan District Attorney's office this morning." Everyone turned to stare at Marina. "That's impossible. I was at home until I came here." "Unless," Carmen said slowly, "someone cloned your phone." The room went silent again. Alexander's expression shifted from suspicion to something much more dangerous. "Victor," he said quietly, "get me everything you can on who had access to Marina's phone data. I want to know everyone who's been tracking her, everyone who's been listening to her calls, everyone who's been reading her texts. Sir, that level of surveillance would require significant resources and just do it." As Victor hurried out, Carmen gathered her things. "I need to prepare for the board meeting. Alexander, whatever you're going to do about this situation, you need to decide fast. The story is spreading exponentially. After Carmen left, Marina and Alexander stood alone in his office, the weight of the morning's revelations settling between them like a wall. "I'm sorry," Alexander said finally. "I should have known you wouldn't." "But you didn't know," Marina interrupted. "That's the problem, isn't it? After all this time, all the things we've shared, your first instinct was still to assume I betrayed you." "Marina." "No, I get it, I really do. You've been hurt before, and trusting people is basically impossible for you. But I thought maybe we'd gotten past that." Alexander ran his hands through his hair, destroying his perfect styling. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be in a relationship where I'm not constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop." "That's exactly why your father leaked this, isn't it?" Marina said, pieces clicking into place. "He knew that the moment we were exposed, you'd retreat behind your walls again. He knew you'd push me away rather than fight for us. You think this is about us? Marina, this is about my entire future. The board could remove me as CEO over this. And would that be so terrible?" Alexander stared at her like she'd suggested he light himself on fire. "Are you insane? This company is everything I've worked for my entire life." "No, it's everything you've been told you should want your entire life. There's a difference. I can't believe we're having this conversation right now. When else are we going to have it? When you're busy being the perfect CEO who never takes risks or lets anyone get close enough to matter? That's not fair. It's completely fair. You're already pulling away from me, and we haven't even been exposed for 12 hours yet." Before Alexander could respond, Victor burst back into the office, his face pale. "Sir, we have a much bigger problem." "Bigger than a corporate scandal and a board revolt?" "Yes." Victor turned his tablet around to show them a live news feed. "Someone just released the security footage from the charity gala, all of it." On the screen, Marina watched herself kiss Alexander for what felt like the 1,000th time. But this footage was different. It showed the entire sequence of events, including the confrontation with the socialites, Alexander's approach, and most damaging of all, the moment immediately after the kiss when Alexander's expression clearly showed he was as surprised as everyone else. "The narrative is changing," Victor continued. "Instead of billionaire hires fake girlfriend, it's becoming innocent woman manipulates grieving billionaire. And they're painting you as a gold digger who orchestrated everything, Miss Santos." Marina sank into a chair, the full scope of the attack becoming clear. "This isn't just about destroying Alexander's reputation. Someone wants to destroy mine too." "But who would benefit from that?" Alexander asked. "Someone who wants to make sure we both lose," Marina said quietly. "Someone who benefits from keeping Alexander isolated and alone." Victor's phone rang, and he answered with a sharp "Da?" His face grew even paler as he listened. "Sir," he said, hanging up, "your mother is downstairs. She's requesting an immediate meeting. My mother never comes to the office. She does today." Catherine Petrovisk entered the office like a queen surveying a battlefield. She was perfectly coiffed, perfectly dressed, and perfectly composed. Everything Alexander always tried to be, and Marina had never cared about being. "Alexander, darling," she said, kissing his cheek. "Miss Santos." The acknowledgement was ice cold. "Mother, if you're here to gloat, I'm here because your father is having chest pains and has been asking for you." Alexander went rigid. "How bad?" "Bad enough that the doctors want to move him to intensive care, but he's refusing to go until he speaks with you both." Marina felt the blood drain from her face. "Both of us?" "He specifically requested Miss Santos's presence. Something about unfinished business." Alexander was already reaching for his jacket. "We need to go, now." "Alexander," Marina said quietly, "maybe I should stay here. Deal with the media, let you handle your family."